Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a short sleeve top. For this textured affair, we're using the lovely Sedge stitch, a few star stitches, and a new neckline I've been excited to try for a while now. Fun times ahead. Speaking of, if you're into style and crochet fun, you're in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet patterns with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 275 grams of yarn, and that is 400 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you were a cookie, which cookie would you be? I actually had a hard time with this answer, but Chief said that I would be a Nilla wafer, and I'll agree, I accept that. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 5 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, and star stitch. This tutorial is for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that is in multiples of 3, the length that we'd like for this top to be. So placing this first chain that we're about to make where our waist is, working our way up until we reach the depth of our neckline. Now I need a total of 7 inches or 18 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 30. If you'd like to cover more of your chest, make a longer chain, or if you'd like to show a little bit more, make a shorter chain. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our sedge stitch. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And for our first sedge stitch of every row, it's going to be a half double and double crochet into that first stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from your hook with a half double crochet. Bring your hook down, into that second chain, pull through all 3 loops to finish our half double. Now let's do our double into that same chain. Yarn over, into that same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now let's do our following sedge stitch. After every sedge stitch set, we're going to skip the 2 following stitches. If we work into those, then we'll be accidentally increasing. So we're going to skip 1, skip 2, and then into that following, or the third chain from our hook. We're now going to insert with a single, a half double, and a double crochet all into that same chain, and that is going to be the remainder of our sedge stitch sets, just like that one. Let's do it again. We're going to skip 1, skip 2, into that following, starting with a single, then with a half double, and then into that same chain with a double crochet. Let's do this just once more. Skip the following chain, and the chain after that, and then into the next, a single, into that same chain, a half double, and then a double crochet. And continue this until we have 2 chains left. We have made our way down with our sedge stitch, and we should all have 2 chains left. Into that last chain, we're going to do an increase. So we're going to do a single, half double, and then 2 double crochets into that last chain. So skip 1, into the last chain, start with a single, and then into that same last chain with a half double, and then 2 double crochets. So there's my first, and there's my second, and that counts as an increase of 4 for this row. Now for every even number row, we will not be doing an increase. So all we're going to do is chain 1 and flip your work. And we're going to do our sedge stitch per usual. So like I said in the previous clip, our first sedge stitch is always just going to be a half double and double crochet into that first stitch. And then all of our other sedge stitches for the rest of the row is going to be single, half double, and double into that same stitch. So after this first set, we're going to skip 1, skip 2, into the following, which should be our single crochet from our previous row, and we can tell because it's a little bit shorter. We're going to insert with a single, half double, and double all into that same stitch. And just to do one more set, skip 1, skip 2, into that following, which again should be a single. Each of our sedge stitch sets should be worked into our previous row's single crochet to get the texture that we want. We're going to insert with a single, half double, and double, and continue this until we have 2 stitches left. We are nearly finished with our row 2. We should all have 1, 2 stitches left. Into the last stitch, we're going to do 1 half double crochet. So yarn over, skip that second to last stitch, and then into the last stitch from our previous row. Insert with 1 half double crochet, and now our row 2 is finished. Getting started on our row 3, it's going to be done the same way as our previous rows. So chain 1, flip our work, and that first set is going to be a half double and a double crochet worked into that same first stitch. And then from there, skip 1, skip 2, and then single, half double, and then double crochet. Continue this until we have 2 stitches left so we can increase together once more. We have made our way down. Our third row is nearly finished. We should all have 2 stitches left. And now into that last stitch, we're going to do another increase, just like our previous odd number row. So a single, half double, and 2 double crochets, all into that same last stitch. And now that our increase is finished, our following row, which is an even number row, will not have any increases or decreases, so chain 1, flip your work, and the first set is going to be a half double, double into that first stitch, skip 2 into that following, start with a single, then a half double, then a double. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we get the neckline portion that we want. So we are going to have a middle chest detail as well that's going to be roughly 3 inches. So placing the first row about 1.5 inches away from mid-chest, we're going to continue on with these 2 rows until we have a portion that can reach over to about mid-shoulder, because that's going to be where we start doing our straps. Once we have that, I will meet you back along the top or right after an odd number row. My neckline portion is all finished. I have a total of 7 rows. My width is about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters unstretched. And now from here, we're going to make a chain that is in multiples of 3 that reaches up to the top of our shoulder. I need a total of 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I made a chain 21. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our sedge stitch all the way down. Lock off that last chain, do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a half double, and then into that same chain with a double. Skip the 2 following chains, just like how we've been doing, and then into the following, a single, a half double, and then a double, all into that same chain. We are going to continue to do this until we reach the end of the row, till we have 2 stitches left. And keeping in mind that every sedge stitch set will be worked into every single crochet stitch once we reach the body portion. Our first shoulder row is nearly finished. We should have 2 stitches left, and now we're just going to half double crochet into that last stitch. So yarn over, skip that following stitch, and then into the stitch right after that, insert your hook with a half double, and now our first shoulder row is finished. Now our shoulder isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then start our sedge stitch with a half double and a double into that first stitch, and then do our sedge stitch all the way down, closing the row off with 1/2 double crochet into that last stitch, just like how we did together. We're going to continue on with this row with no increases and no decreases until the shoulder portion can now reach the tip of our shoulder, and I'll meet you back along the bottom or right after an even number row. My shoulder portion is now finished. I have a total of 16 rows, and my width is now 5 inches or 12 centimeters. And now we're going to finish off our front panel with our underarm portion. So since we should all be along the bottom, we're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the stitch that we have that's nearest to the corner of our underarm. It needs to be in an even number of stitches from the top, so I've inserted my stitch marker into the 24th stitch. That's just about 5 inches or 12 centimeters. And just as a quick tip, it should be a single crochet stitch from our previous row. From here, since we're along the bottom, we're going to do our sedge stitch all the way up until we are 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. We have made our way down with our first underarm row. We should have left 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. From here, we're going to do a 1/2 double crochet into the stitch right before our stitch marker. So yarn over, skip 1 stitch, into the following, a 1/2 double crochet. Now into the rows, working our way down towards the bottom, we're going to start that row off with a decrease. So now we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. We're going to start this row off with a decrease of 3 1/2 double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, insert your hook into the top of that last stitch from our previous row, pull through into that following stitch, pull through, and then into the stitch right after that, pull through. Should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 loops on our hook. So all together, yarn over, pull through all 5 of those loops. And then from here into that following stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, we're going to do our sedge stitch all the way down. So just into that following stitch, insert with your first sedge stitch, which is a 1/2 double, and double into that same stitch. Then sedge stitch till the end of the row, finishing when we have 2 stitches left, and 1/2 double crochet into the last. We're going to continue on with these 2 rows till this can stretch over to mid underarm. Now I will be finishing after these 2 rows, giving me a total of 18 rows and a total width of 5.5 inches or 13 centimeters. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then we're going to make 1 more identical panel. I am back. I have a total of 18 rows, and my width is 5.5 inches or 13 centimeters, and I made a second identical panel. Now that we have both of these finished up, we can get started on the back. Now the back is going to be fairly simple. We're going to start by making a chain, again that's in multiples of 3, that can stretch from mid underarm across our back to mid underarm. I needed a total of 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters, so I made a chain 42. Now we're going to get started on our first sedge stitch row. Since we already know how to do this, let's just go through this quickly. Block off that last chain, do a chain 1 into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a 1/2 double and then a double. After that, we are going to skip the following 2 chains, and then into the chain right after, a single, a 1/2 double, and then a double crochet. Continue that until we have 2 chains left. I've made my way down with my sedge stitch. We should have 2 chains left, and into that last one, we're going to insert with a 1/2 double crochet. And for this portion of our back panel, since our back panel is worked horizontally, we're going to continue on with our sedge stitch without any increases or decreases. So chain 1, flip our work, start with a 1/2 double and double into that first stitch, skip 2 stitches, and then our normal sedge stitches, making our way all the way down. Now from here, we're going to continue on with this sedge stitch row with no increases and no decreases, like I said, for the same amount of sets that we have for our front panel's underarm. So let's count that out together just so we all know what we're doing. Now taking a look at our front panel, we're going to count the amount of sets that we have for our underarm. Now double check and make sure that we're not counting the amount of sets that we have for the neckline, because the outer edges may look a little similar. Now to determine the amount of rows that we need to do for the lower back portion, let's all start off by counting our last underarm row together. So we're going to start by counting the amount of sets that we have. So let's do this together. So for me, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we will be counting that decrease as well, so 13. I have a total of 13 sets. We're going to take that sum that we just counted out, and then we're going to multiply that by 2. So 13 times 2 for me is 26. I'm going to be doing a total of 26 of our lower back rows. And just as a really quick tip, the height of the lower back rows that we have is going to be roughly the same size as this underarm portion. It might not be the exact same size, so maybe about an inch or two off, but that's completely fine. It'll all even out once when it's seamed. I am back and the lower back of my back panel is finished. Just to give you guys a visual of the height difference between the lower back and the underarm portion for the front panel, this is where it's at. So for me, I'm missing about an inch or a half an inch, but if you guys tug on it, it should roughly be around the same size, but it doesn't need to be exact. But once we have the right number of rows, we're now going to work on the underarm portion. Now, the underarm portion is going to be a decrease of 3 into the ends of every other row for the same amount of rows as underarm rows that we have as the front panel. So I only have 2, so I'm going to be doing the following 2 rows with you. So along the end, chain 2 and flip our work. We're going to start with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So we already know how to do this one. We're going to yarn over, insert into that first stitch, pull through, following, pull through, following, and pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5. And then start our sedge stitch right into that next stitch. So it should be the single crochet from our previous row. And we're doing our first sedge stitch, and for this portion it's going to start with our single, half double, and double, and continue per usual till we have 5 stitches left. At the end of our first decrease row, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches left. From here, yarn over, skip the following 2 stitches, and then into that third, second, and last stitch, a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So skip 1, skip 2, into that following, pull through, second to last, pull through, and then into that last, pull through. Should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. So yarn over, pull through all 5. And a really quick tip that I have for you is to insert your stitch marker into the edge of these decrease rows that we're going to have, just so we know where our underarm is for the back panel. Now, like I said, we're going to be decreasing into every other row. So to start this following row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch per usual. So a half double double into that first one, skip 2 stitches, and then our sedge stitch, making our way all the way down. I will meet you back when we have 4 stitches left. We've made our way down with our second underarm row for our back panel. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left. Now this row, it doesn't technically count as a decrease row, even though we're about to do a decrease of 2 half double crochets. We're just ending this row off with a decrease of 2 half double crochets, just to make sure that we visually get the same decrease along the edges. As you guys can see, this is starting to curve in nicely, and this one doesn't curve in quite as much. So we're going to close this row off with a decrease of 2, but this doesn't count as a decrease row. And we're also doing a decrease of 2 so that we don't have a huge gap along the end. And one more quick tip before we get going. Each of our even number rows, so the row that we're currently working on, will have 2 less sets, and that's not including our decreases, from our previous row. So to do our decrease of 2 half double crochets, we're going to yarn over, skip 1, skip 2, and then into that second to last, and into that last stitch, we're going to do our decrease. So into that second to last, insert your hook, pull through, and then also into that last stitch, and pull through. We should have 4 loops on our hook, so yarn over, and pull through all 4 of those loops. As you can see, this is starting to give us a really nice slant, which is exactly what we want. From here, continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the front panel. I only had 2 rows, so I am actually done. And once we have the entirety of our underarm portion finished up, we're now going to do the upper back for our back panel. And that's going to be more sedge stitches with no increases and no decreases. So when we have our last row, all we're going to do is chain 1 and flip our work. And then we're going to make our way all the way down with our sedge stitch with no increases and no decreases. And the way we're going to figure out how many rows we need to do for the upper back, for the back panel, is the same way that we figured out the bottom. So taking a look at our front panel, we're only going to take a look at the top half of our piece, so not including anything from the underarm down. From this last row, and making sure that we are looking at the underarm because the neckline could look the same, we're going to count the amount of sets that we have. So counting from this first set that I have right over here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to take that number and multiply that times 2, which is going to be 16 for me. So I'm going to be doing an additional 16 rows from where I'm at. Once when I have that portion finished up, I will do a chain up of 1 and cut. The entirety of my back panel is finished. I now have a total of 44 rows and my height is roughly 14 inches or 36 centimeters. And do not fret, this is going to be just a little bit shorter than our front panel, but we're still good to go. What we're going to need to do from here is single crochet along the underarm portion of our back panel to make it easier for us to seam the front and back together. I already have one of mine finished, so let's do the other side together. So let's all start by inserting our hook into that bottom corner stitch of the back panel. Now this is going to be a single crochet row that alternates between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. Now I do want to make sure that we end up having the same amount of stitches as our front panel's last row for our underarm. Now the amount of single crochets that we're about to do should be roughly the same amount of stitches that we have for the last row for our front panel because of the math that we did, but it may be off by just 1 or 2. So if you need to add an extra stitch, feel free, or if you need to take away a stitch or 2, that is fine as well. So let's just count out the stitches that I have and then we can do a single crochet row together. So this is my front panel's underarm. I've already counted out my stitches. I have a total of 38 stitches right here. So we want to make sure that we have the same amount of stitches for the back panel, so 38 for me. And just double check and make sure that we're looking at our underarm and not the last row for our neckline. We are now going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now from here, like I said, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So finding that first side row that we have, insert your hook in through that top loop with a single crochet. Let's do the next. This is our following side row. Insert into that top loop with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, and then there's 2. Let's do just one more set of rows together. Find our following side row, insert into that top loop with just 1, and then into that following side row, insert into there with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, and there's 2. Continue this until we have the same amount of stitches as the last row for our front panel. And when we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Our single crochet rows along our back panel are all finished. Now we're going to single crochet across the top of our front panels, so let's put our back panel away for now. As you can see, I've already done 1 single crochet row along the top of our front panel, so let's do the following together. Let's all insert our hook into the top corner stitch of our front panel, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now this is going to be done the same way that we did the back panel. We're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So find that first side row, find that top loop and insert with a single crochet, find our following side row, insert into there with 2 single crochets. Now the amount of stitches that we have here don't need to match up with everything, so just continue to alternate between 1 to 2 stitches. When we don't have any more side rows left, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that the single crochet row along the tops of both of our front panels are finished, we're ready to seam everything together, and we're going to start with our sides. So let's all start by placing our front panel on top of our back panel, and we want to make sure that our underarms are aligned, and then the neckline is along the inside of our piece. And from here, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and back panel. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And this is going to be a single crochet seam, so let's all start by inserting our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, and also into that first stitch into the back panel. And for those of you like me, you should have a couple tail ends. I'm just going to place that over my hook, and then single crochet around everything to weave them in as I go. Let's do the next one. This is my following stitch, so insert my hook into there, into the front panel, into my following stitch into the back panel, and then single crochet, and then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that our sides are seamed, we're ready to seam up our shoulders. This is going to be the same single crochet seam that we did for the sides, so we're going to make sure the work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seams that we have are flipped outwards, and we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just to do the first one, we're going to find that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop, first stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, and then single crochet them together. And continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So everything is now all seamed together, and we have kind of a vest look. And now we're going to start working on our middle chest detail that turns into our collar. Right before we get that started, we're going to want to count the available stitches that we have into the back panel first. And then we're going to find our middle stitch, or stitches in my case, and then insert our stitch markers. So this may be a little bit different for everyone, but for those of you that have my numbers, we should have a total of 10 available stitches. So into my 5th and into my 6th stitch, I inserted my stitch markers. If you have more or less stitches, that is completely fine as well. Just find that middle stitch and insert your stitch marker. And if you have just one middle stitch, that's completely fine as well. Now we're going to start by doing a single crochet row. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of the front panel. I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet into every stitch, which for this first portion, it should be our chain, until we reach the curved portion of our neckline. So we should have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made when we started off this entire piece. The first portion of our single crochet row is finished. We are now at our first side row, but into that last single crochet that we did, we are going to insert our stitch marker just so we know where the corner is. And after we've inserted our stitch marker, all we're going to do, since we have a bunch of side rows, is put 2 single crochets into every side row, and we're putting 2 into every side row because it's at a slant, instead of alternating between 1 to 2, because we have just a little bit more surface space that we need to cover. From here, we're going to put 1 single crochet into every stitch going up our shoulder, and then working across our back, making sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches because we need to know where the middle is. From here, 1 single crochet into every stitch, working our way back down, 2 single crochet into every side row, and then I'll meet you back once we finish this portion, just so I can remind you that we need to insert our stitch marker into that first stitch, working our way down. Just to do the first one, we're going to find that first side row and insert our hook into that top loop with 1, and then 2 single crochet, and that's it. So I've made my way all the way up and around with my single crochet row. I have just did my last single crochet into my side row, and I just wanted to remind you that the first single crochet that we're going to do, working our way down our front panel, we're going to be inserting a stitch marker to match this stitch marker right here. So we're going to find that first stitch and insert our hook, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that stitch. And we're going to continue putting 1 single crochet into every stitch till we reach the end of the row. So our single crochet prep row is all finished up. Now we can get started on our detail. So for everyone, we're all going to start by making a chain 12, and that's roughly going to be 3 inches or 7 centimeters. Now that we have our chain 12, we're going to slip stitch it into the bottom corner stitch of the other front panel that we have. We're going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook to connect our chain. And from there, we're going to single crochet back. So start by slip stitching into that next available stitch into the base. This is my following stitch that I have into the base. So I'm going to slip stitch into there and flip our work, and then put 1 single crochet into every chain. And we should have 12 single crochets since we made a chain 12. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain, so now we're going to flip our work. Now start by finding that first chain. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert in through there with 1 single crochet. Let's do the next. This is my following chain, so 1 single crochet into there as well. and continue this until we have a total of 12 single crochets. So now that this single crochet row is finished, we're going to need to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there to connect this row 1. So insert, yarn over, pull through both of those loops. And now we're going to slip stitch up the following 2 stitches into the base to get started on our star stitch. So we're going to slip stitch up 1 stitch. That still doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect it, and into that following another slip stitch. And now that we have that, we're going to flip our work. Now we're going to get started on our star stitch detail. So we're going to need to pull up 6 loops. So all together, let's find the last stitch from our previous row, but making sure that we're not counting any of those slip stitches because those are just to connect the row. Here's my first stitch from my previous row. I'm going to insert, yarn over, pull up a loop for 2 loops on our hook. Into that following stitch, yarn over, pull through for 3 loops on our hook. Into that following stitch, pull through for 4 loops. Following, pull through for 5 loops. And then 1 more because we need a total of 6 loops on our hook. Now all together we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. From here we're going to yarn over and gently pull through all 6 of those loops that's on our hook. And then to finish off our star stitch, we're going to chain 1. And after that chain 1, that little gap that we have, that forms the eye of our star stitch. Now to do our following star stitch, we're going to start by inserting our hook into the eye of our previous star stitch. So insert your hook into that gap, pull through. We do need a total of 6 loops on our hook again, so that following space that we're going to be inserting our hook into is going to be in between that second to last and that last post from our previous star stitch. So as you can see, here's one post, here's our second post. In between those 2 posts, you're going to insert your hook, pull through for a total of 3 loops on our hook, and then we're going to insert our hook into the last stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into. So this is that stitch for me. It will be occupied. We're going to insert our hook in through there, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, and then once we have those 4, the following 2 stitches are going to be worked into those 2 available stitches. So we're going to insert into that following stitch, pull through for 5 loops on our hook, and then 1 more because we need 6, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. Then just like how we did the other one, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 6 of those loops, and chain 1 to form the eye of our star stitch. Since we all did a chain 12, we're going to have a total of 4 of these sets. Here's 1, here's 2. Let's get started on our third one together. Again, our third one is going to be done the same exact way as our second. So insert into the eye of that star stitch, pull through, in between the second to last and last post from our previous star stitch, pull through, into that last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, and then into that following stitch, pull through for 5, and then into that following stitch right after that, pull through for 6 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. We're going to be doing this once more. So into the eye of that previous star stitch, pull through, in between the post of the second to last and last post from our previous star stitch, pull through, into the last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, and then into that following stitch, pull through, into the stitch right after that, and pull through. We should have a total of 6 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to finish off our 4th star stitch. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4 star stitches, and then an extra stitch. So yarn over and insert your hook in through that last stitch from this row with a half double crochet. And now we're going to connect it into the base. So into the base, we're going to start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. Here's 1, here's 2. Into that second stitch, we are going to insert with a slip stitch. And now our star stitch row is finished. Our following row is going to be a single crochet row. So let's slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, Those 2 slip stitches don't count as a stitch, that's just to connect it into the base and to work our way up to the following row. And we're going to flip our work. And now that our work is slipped, we're going to single crochet across. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the last stitch from our previous row, so into the top of that half double crochet, keeping in mind that those slip stitches don't count as a stitch just yet. So insert your hook into the top of that half double crochet with 1 single crochet. Now we're going to be inserting 1 single crochet into the following star stitch's eye. So as you guys can see, this little circle that we have right here is the eye of that next star stitch. So just 1 single crochet goes into that first one. And then it's going to be 2 single crochets into the following star stitch's eyes until we reach the end of the row. So this is our following eye right here, this circle. Insert your hook into there with 1, and then into that same loop with 2 single crochets. This is the following eye of my next star stitch. So 2 single crochets into there. And then this is the following eye of our next star stitch. So 2 single crochets into there. Then into that last stitch that we have, we're going to insert with 1 single crochet. Now we need to connect it into the base. So find that next stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there, and now our single crochet row is finished. We're going to get started on our following star stitch row because it will not be the same as the first one. So we're going to slip stitch up the following 2 stitches into the base. So there's my first, there's my second, and we're going to flip our work. Now after we flip our work, this is what our first 3 rows should look like. Now we're going to start the first star stitch for this row by working into that first slip stitch that we made that connected it into the base. So looking at mine together, this is the last slip stitch that I did. This is my second to last, and this is the slip stitch that I did that connected my single crochet row. Into that slip stitch, we're going to be pulling up 2 loops. So 1, 2, 3, we're going to insert our hook into that back loop. So into the loop that's furthest away from us, we're going to insert our hook and pull through for 2 loops on our hook. We're going to pull up a second loop into that same stitch, but now working into the front loop. So this is my front loop right here. We may need to pull our work apart a little bit, but that's fine. Insert your hook into that front loop, yarn over, and pull through for 3 loops on our hook. And then from here, we're going to be working into our regular stitches per usual. So into that following stitch, insert, pull up a loop for 4, following stitch, pull up a loop for 5, and then following stitch, pull up a loop for 6. Yarn over, pull through all 6 of those loops, and chain 1. Now let's do our following star stitch, inserting our hook into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, inserting our hook in between the second to last and last post from our previous star stitch, pull through, then inserting our hook into the same stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into. So insert, pull through, and then into that following stitch, pull through, and into the stitch right after that, pull through for a total of 6 loops on our hook. From here, yarn over, pull through all 6 of those loops, chain 1. We should have 2 sets. Let's do our last 2 sets. Again, into the eye of that star stitch, pull through, in between the last 2 posts of our previous star stitch, pull through, into the last stitch that our star stitch was worked into, pull through, and into the following 2 stitches, pull through, should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to secure. Now let's do our last. We should all have 2 stitches left, into the eye of that previous star stitch, pull through, in between the last 2 posts of our previous star stitch, pull through, into the last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, into that second to last stitch, pull through, into that last stitch, and pull through for a total of 6 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to finish off this star stitch, and then we're always going to close off our star stitch row with a half double crochet. So yarn over, and then into that same last stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into, 1 half double crochet. And this row and our single crochet row that we're about to do is going to be the remainder of our star stitch piece until we reach our stitch markers. So just to slip stitch it into the base, we're going to count up 1, count up 2 available stitches, and slip stitch in through there to connect our row 4. Let's do our single crochet row together again. So slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip our work. Once when our work is flipped, find the half double crochet from our previous row, insert with 1 single crochet, find the eye from our last star stitch from our previous row, insert into there with 1 single crochet, and then into the eye of our following star stitch and the rest of our star stitches after this, 2 single crochets into each of those. So there's 1, there's 2, this is my following eye, there's 1, there's 2, and then into the last eye that we have, there's 1, there's 2, and then into that last stitch from our previous row, insert with 1, and then slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base. Now just to do the star stitch with you guys one more time, we're going to slip stitch up the following 2 stitches into the base. So there's 1, and there's 2, and flip our work. This star stitch row is going to be done exactly the same way as our previous star stitch row. So counting the slip stitches that we have worked into the base, here's 1, 2, and 3. Into that third one, we're going to be pulling up 2 loops from there, starting by inserting our hook into that stitch's back loop, pull up a loop, and then next into that same stitch's front loop for 3 loops on our hook, and then into that next stitch, pull up a loop, next stitch, pull up a loop, next stitch, pull up a loop for 6, pull through all 6 loops on our hook, and chain 1. And from here, we're going to continue on with our star stitches for the rest of the row. It's going to be an exact repeat of our previous star stitch row, and then a single crochet row right after that. We're going to continue on with this until we reach our stitch marker, and then I will meet you back. My star stitch detail is all finished. The last row that everyone should have, no matter what size we're making, should be a star stitch row, and it should be worked into the stitch marker stitch along both sides of our panel. Now from here, we're going to start working on the left side of our star stitch detail. So what we're going to do is slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip our work. So now that we flipped our work, we're going to do our single crochet row, and I'm using air quotes because for this first row, we are going to have to do some half double crochets as well, until we reach the middle of our star stitch detail. Now this will be the same for every size. So we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet into the top of the last half double crochet from our previous row. So that is per usual. And then into the following eye of our following star stitch, insert with just 1 single crochet. So that is per usual. Now into the following eye that we have into our next star stitch, we're going to be doing 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, insert with your first half double, and then into that same eye with a second and with a third half double crochet. So for this first row for our collar split, we should have a total of 5 stitches. And from here, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, we're going to do our star stitch. So getting started on our first star stitch, it's going to be done a little bit differently. So we're going to find that second chain from our hook, and then we're going to start by inserting our hook into that back loop. So kind of like the same way that we inserted it into the back loop when we were connecting it into the base. So you may need to twist your work a little bit, but find that back loop, insert your hook in through there, and pull through for 2 loops on our hook. Now we're going to find that same chain and insert into that available front loop. You may need to pull your work apart a little bit to insert into that front loop and pull through for 3 loops on our hook. And then we still need a total of 6 loops on our hook. So into that following stitch into the base, pull through for 4, into that next stitch, pull through for 5, and then into the stitch right after that for 6 loops on our hook. And from here, yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to finish off that star stitch, and we have 1 more left to do since we have split our 4 star stitches in half. So just like usual, we're going to insert our hook into the eye of that previous star stitch, pull through, in between that second to last and last post from our previous star stitch, pull through, into that last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, we should have 2 stitches left, and then pull up a loop into each of those stitches. So there's my first for a total of 5 loops, and then into that last stitch that we have, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to finish off that star stitch, and then still half double crochet into that same stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into to close off this row. And now we're going to connect it into the base. So just like before, connecting our star stitch, we're going to count up 1, count up 2 stitches into the base, and slip stitch into that second stitch. And now our star stitch row is finished up. Just to get started on our following row, we're going to slip stitch up that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and then do our single crochet row. So this single crochet row isn't going to have any other stitches, just single crochets. So start by finding the half double crochet from our previous row, should be that first stitch, insert with 1 single crochet. And then into the following eye that we have from our previous star stitch, insert with just 1. And then we should all have just 1 star stitch left. Insert your hook into the eye of that star stitch with 2 single crochets. And then into that last stitch, insert with 1 single crochet. So altogether we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches. And just to get started on our following star stitch together, chain 2 and flip your work. Now the star stitch row is going to be a repeat from our previous star stitch row. So really quickly we're going to find that second chain from our hook and insert into that back loop. Then we're going to pull up a loop. We are then going to find that following loop into that same chain, so into that front loop, pull up a loop, and then into that following stitch, pull through, following stitch, pull through, and stitch right after that, pull through for 6 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1, and then we have 1 more star stitch to do. So into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, in between the 2 last posts from our previous star stitch, pull through, into that last stitch from our previous star stitch, pull through, and then we should have 2 stitches left, so into that second to last, pull through, and into that last, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1, and half double crochet into that same last stitch. And just to connect it, we're going to count up 1, count up 2 stitches, and slip stitch into that base. And that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, working our way all the way up and over to our stitch marker stitch that we have along our back panel. If you have 2 like me, or if you have 1, that's completely fine. Just make sure that your last row is worked into that stitch marker stitch, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I've made my way all the way up until I have reached my stitch marker along the back, and I am worked into that stitch marker stitch. Now we're going to get started on the right side of our collar. So we're going to insert our hook into the second star stitch's eye, so into the stitch that's nearest to the middle. So let's all flip our work upside down. Taking a look at the back, insert in through that eye, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and we're all going to start with a chain 2, but that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. We just need the height. And we're going to kind of mirror what we did on the other side. So into that same eye that our chain is in, we're going to do 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, into that same eye, 1 half double, into that same again with a second half double, and then into that same with a third half double crochet. And then we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into the following star stitch's eye, and then into the last stitch from our previous row with 1 single crochet. And now that we have that, we are going to slip stitch it into that following stitch into the base, which should be the stitch right after our stitch marker. Pull through. Now this single crochet row is finished up, and now we're going to work our way up to the following row, which is our star stitch row. So just like how we connected this side, we're going to slip stitch up that following 2 stitches into the base. So there's 1, there's 2, and flip your work. Now this is going to be done the same exact way. So into that third slip stitch from our hook, we're going to insert into that back loop, pull through, also insert your hook into that same slip stitch's front loop, and pull through, for 3 loops on our hook, and then into that following stitch, pull through, stitch right after that, pull through, and then one more, pull through for a total of 6 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 for our first star stitch, and then we have one more left to do. So into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, in between the last 2 posts, pull through, into that same stitch that our last star was worked into, pull through, and then a pull up, and then another one into that last stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1, forming the eye, and then we're going to half double crochet into that same last stitch that our last star stitch was worked into. So yarn over, insert with a half double crochet. And then we're going to work our way up to the following row. So chain 1 and flip your work. And this is going to be a regular single crochet row. So into the last stitch from our previous row, insert, starting with 1 single. Into that following star stitch's eye, we're going to go in with 1 single, and then into that following stitch's eye, 2 singles. There's 1, there's 2, and then into the last stitch from our previous row, 1 single. So we should all have a total of 5 stitches. And now we're going to connect it into the base, and that is it. We're going to now continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we make our way up to our following stitch marker stitch. And when we do, do not do a chain up of 1 and cut, just so that we can seam it all together. Now I have just finished up going in with the right side of my collar or my front detail, and I am all done. We didn't do a chain up of 1 and cut because now we're just going to do a single crochet seam to seam it together. So let's all start by making sure the work is flipped wrong side out. So now that our work is flipped wrong side out, we're going to be inserting our hook into the first stitch into the front panel, into the first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back panel, and single crochet. And continue this until we don't have any more stitches left, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that our neckline's finished, we're going to get started on our sleeve. Now just to get the first one finished up, we're all going to make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up, and then we're all going to start with the right sleeve. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the last stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So let's find our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert in through that top loop with 1 single crochet. And this is my following side row, so I'm going to insert in through that gap with 2 single crochets. There is 1, and there is 2. And from here, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch until we reach our shoulder seam. Now, just as a reminder, this is the portion that we did when we got started on the underarm for our front panel. So we should have the same amount of stitches that we skipped. So for me, I will be having a total of 24 single crochets right here. And keep that number in mind because we're going to need it when we do the other side of our shoulder. Now that we've single crocheted up our first half of our armhole, we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into that last stitch that we just did, so we know where one of our middle points is. And now we're going to be working our way down the back panel, and that's going to be a bunch of side rows. So working down the shoulder portion of the back panel, it's going to be done pretty much the same way that we did when we single crocheted the edges of the back panel. We need the amount of single crochets that we're about to do within the back panel to match the same amount of stitches that we had for the front panel. So like I said, I had a total of 24 stitches working my way up. So alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets working my way down, I should have a total of 24 stitches as well. And that's 24 single crochets, not counting the underarm stitches as well. And like with the back panel, if your stitches are off by 1 or 2, it's fine. Just add or subtract a stitch or 2 to make sure you get the same amount of stitches along both sides. So just to do my first one, I'm going to find my first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with a single crochet. And into that first single crochet that we just made, working our way back down, we're going to insert a stitch marker into there as well. And those are our 2 middle stitches for our sleeve. And finding our following side row, insert with 2 single crochets, and then just do the next, This is my following side row. There's 1 single crochet, and then into the next, there's 2 single crochets. And we're going to continue this, making our way all the way down, and keeping in mind that we do have some underarm rows to work into as well. And doing that is still alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets. Once we made our way all the way down, slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our single crochet row is finished, we can now get started on the length of our sleeve. Now I would like for my sleeve to be a tiny cap sleeve. For those of you that would like a tiny cap sleeve as well, we're all going to start by making a chain 3. And for those of you that want a different length sleeve, start off by making a chain in multiples of 3. Now that we all have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. For those of you that have a longer chain than 3, we're going to do our sedge stitch the same way that we've been doing all the way down until we have 2 chains left. For those of us that just have that chain 3, we're going to start into that chain that we blocked off with a second chain from our hook with a half double and 3 double crochets. So into that chain, start with 1 half double crochet, and then into that same chain, 3 double crochets. So there's 1, there is 2, and there is 3. Now when we have 2 chains left, we are going to yarn over. Into that last chain, we're going to insert with a half double crochet to close off this row. And we do need to connect it into the base as well, so we're going to start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. So count 1, count 2. Into that second stitch, we're going to slip stitch it into there to close off our row 1. And to work our way up to our row 2, we're going to slip stitch up that following stitch and flip our work. And now we're going to do our sedge stitch per usual. So yarn over, into the last stitch from our previous row, not those slip stitches. We're going to insert with our first sedge stitch, which is a half double, double. Then we're going to skip the following 2 stitches, then insert with a single, half double, and double. And we're going to continue with our sedge stitch until we have 2 stitches left if you had more than just 3 chains. But if you did start with a chain 3, we're going to half double crochet into that last stitch because we should just have 1 stitch left. And for those of you that have a long chain, you should have 2 stitches left. So half double crochet into that last stitch as well. At the end of the row, we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. To get started on our row 3, we're going to start with a regular first sedge stitch, so a half double and a double. Skip 2 stitches, and then a regular sedge, so single, half double, double. And if you have more stitches, continue that until we have 2 stitches left. When we do, we're now going to do an increase into that last stitch. So we're going to skip that second to last, and then into that last stitch, it's going to be the same increase that we did for the front panel. So start with a single, then a half double, and then 2 double crochets. And when our increase is finished, we're going to connect it into the base. So count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into that second stitch into the base, and then just for good measure, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base to work our way up to the following row and flip our work. Now let's just finish up our 4th sedge stitch row. So start by doing our regular sedge stitch. The first one is always just a half double, double. Skip 2 stitches into that following stitch, a single half double, double. Skip 2 stitches and repeat until we have 2 stitches left. Now when we have those 2 stitches left, we're going to yarn over, skip that second to last stitch, and then into the last, insert with 1 half double crochet to close off this row. And when we have that half double crochet, that's it. We're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we reach our first stitch marker stitch, making sure that that row is worked into there. And then I'll meet you back to get started on the decrease side of our sleeve. I am back and I've just made my way all the way up with my increase rows for my sleeve. And now we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did here, but instead of increases, we're going to do decreases, working our way back down. So since we should all be along the outer edge, we're going to do our regular sedge stitch, working our way back with no increases and no decreases. And I'll meet you back when we have 2 stitches left so that we can connect it into the base and then decrease together for the following row. I've made my way down with my sedge stitches. I have 1, 2 stitches left. So we're going to skip that second to last stitch and then half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. And this is how we're going to close off this row right here. And just to connect it into the base, we're going to count up 1, which should be our stitch marker stitch, and then into that second stitch, which is that following stitch, slip stitch into there. So we're still connecting it into the base the same way that we've been doing. Now to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip your work. Now since we're working our way down, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, insert your hook into that last stitch from our previous row, pull through that following, pull through in the stitch right after that, pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook, then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 5. And then from here we're going to sedge stitch all the way down. So starting into that following stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, insert in through there with our first sedge stitch, which is a half double, double crochet, and then from here it's per usual, so skip 2, into that following a single half double double, and continue this till we reach the end of the row, making sure that we half double crochet into that last stitch because we need it to be blunt. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch, making our way back towards the base, and I'll meet you back when we have 3 stitches left. So we're back towards the base, and we should have 1, 2, 3 stitches left. So now we're going to skip the following 2 stitches and then into the last stitch from our previous row, insert with a half double crochet. And that's how we're going to close off these rows. We're now going to slip stitch it into the base, so count up 1, count up 2, slip stitch into there, and from here it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back to seam everything together. We are back and we have just finished up the decrease side of our sleeve. Now that we don't have any more stitches left, we're going to seam it all together, so let's all make sure that our work is slipped wrong side out. Now that our work is slipped, we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And now from here, we're going to do a single crochet seam. Now a really quick tip, the end that our working yarn is in, so that last row that we just did, we will have 1 extra stitch from our chain that we made, but that's completely fine. We're just going to skip that last stitch once when we get there. Just to do the first one, we're going to find that first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook. Find that first stitch into the back panel, insert your hook in through there, and single crochet, and continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Now that both of our sleeves are finished, the next thing we're going to do is our bottom band. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have along the bottom of our piece. All we're going to do is a single crochet row, so that's going to be 1 single crochet into every stitch, 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around. So just to do the first one, I'm going to insert my hook, I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now this is my first stitch that I have right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there, and then a single crochet, and then that's it. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way around. We do need the single crochet row to end on an even number, so if you end on an odd number, that's fine. Either add a stitch or take away a stitch to make sure that it ends on an even number. And then lastly, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this bottom portion can stretch. So when the single crochet row is done, try our piece on and make sure that it can fit. If it's a little too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's a little too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. I will meet you back right after we do a slip stitch into that chain space. Our single crochet row is finished, everything fits, and now we're going to get started on our star stitch. Since we already know how to do this, we're just going to do the first one together. Right after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're going to do a chain 1, and we're going to need to pull up 6 loops. So insert your hook in through that first stitch, yarn over, pull through for 2 loops on our hook. Into that following stitch, pull through, following stitch, pull through, following, pull through, and 1 more, and pull through for a total of 6 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, gently pull through all 6, do a chain up of 1. Just to do one more, into the eye of that previous star stitch, pull through, into the last 2 posts from our previous star stitch, pull through, into that same stitch that our previous post is worked into, pull through, and then into the following 2 stitches, pull through, for 6 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. We're going to continue this until we reach the end of the row. We've made our way all the way around with our star stitch. We should have 1 stitch left, and we're just going to half double crochet into that last stitch. So yarn over, into that last stitch, pull through 3, and now we're just going to slip stitch into that chain space to close off this row. Now our following row is going to be a single crochet row, so chain 1 and flip our work. This single crochet row is going to be the same as our previous single crochet rows, so start by single crocheting into the top of the half double crochet from our previous row. Keeping in mind that the stitch nearest to our hook looks like a stitch, but it's actually the slip stitch that we did. So not working into that first stitch because that doesn't count as one, and into the top of that half double crochet from our previous row. There goes 1 single crochet. Into the eye of our next star stitch, we're going to put 1 single crochet, and then put 2 single crochets into every eye after that. So this is the following eye, insert, in with 2 single crochets, and make your way all the way around. We've made our way around with our single crochet row. Into that last star stitches eye that we have, we did 2 single crochets. Now we should have 1 stitch left, so we're going to insert our hook in through there with just 1 single crochet to finish off this row. And just slip stitch into that chain space, chain 2, and then flip our work. And this portion is actually going to be the same way that we did our star stitch for our collar. So just as a refresher, we're going to insert our hook into that second chain from our hook's back loop. So twist your work if you have to, insert into that back loop, pull through for 2 loops on our hook. Right after that, insert your hook into that same chain's front loop, pull through for 3 loops on our hook. Then insert your hook into that following stitch, pull through, stitch right after that, pull through, and stitch right after that, pull through for 6 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 6 loops, chain 1. And we're going to continue on with our regular star stitch, making our way all the way around. Our bottom band isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows. So our single crochet row, and then our star stitch row until we get the bottom band the length that we'd like. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to be doing a total of 5 rows, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. My bottom band is all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are all down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!